Vishal? Well, without her, I would still be D-tier garbage, so I'm quite grateful to her, and obviously she is.
Oh, that girl. Well, people keep comparing me to her, but I think it's clear to everyone that she's...
Isn't it obvious? I gave her a vision for this very reason. Even though I am the Electro Archon, that girl is...
She outdamages me.
She's less teammate dependent.
She's more flexible too. And of course, among us 4 stars, she is...
the strongest.
Hello there, Flip here, and as always, the schedule is due time for your complimentary Fischl glazing video. But in this case, the first half of this video will cover Clorinde and why Fischl is so vital to our teams, and very close to a must build if you plan to use Clorinde. But before we do that, hi! Clorinde and Alhytham are around the corner, and if you'd like to save yourself some cash, then I'd like to announce the sponsor of today's video, Loot Bar. Loot Bar is a safe service I've been using for a few months now that allows you to buy primary gems at a 20% discount, only needing your UID and region. So if I just do this, and would you look at that, in only 3 minutes I've received my gems. I got the 3,280 gems pack at only £37, saving me £8 from the original price. This site has also been endorsed by other creators like Tevot Times, Dukaja, and now yours truly. Loot Bar essentially acts as a gateway, using a VPN to cut down on the cost of gems by removing certain taxes, whilst going through the official top-up methods for the game, which allows you to enjoy all the same benefits as in-game. So use my link in the description below to get a 5% off new user coupon on your purchase. Thank you Loot Bar for sponsoring the video, now back to it. For the basics of the Chlorfish synergy, or whatever people are going to call it, I'm going to make this very brief. Clorinde is an electro on-field carry. On-field carries typically want to swirl their element. Clorinde has no way to apply electro swirl without sacrificing a large part of her damage, but with Fischl she can through a charge attack or just by casting Oz. Woo, video done. That's not my hands clapping. Okay, that's not the full explanation, but that is the most general way to explain it. For any Onimo team, you can't really use Clorinde as a solo electro, unlike Raiden, who can use a team like Soup as her E gives you some off-field electro for swirling. So the easiest way to solve this issue with Clorinde is just by using her with another electro unit. Then the other problem arises with the fact that most of the electro units are either played on field or aren't self-sustaining, whether that's a team issue or energy issue. Kuki kind of does nothing for Clorinde, especially considering the fact that she heals herself anyways. Yai takes a hot minute to set up, and her damage profile isn't going to be that amazing when she isn't constantly proccing aggravates or just on-fielding. And then Lisa, ER issues, and even when not accounting for this, she's still not going to be as good as Fischl offensively. And lastly, Sara. Keeping my personal biases aside, for hypercarry teams she should be fine. The problem comes in with her not having very consistent application for teams like EC or Aggravate, where you can lose the Electro Aura before swirling depending on setup. Also, Clorinde doesn't really do enough talent damage by herself to compete with hypercarries without reactions. And considering that with Bennett/Sara you'll go over 3k attack, you'll also get less value from her A1 too, which is like 40% of her damage. You'll pretty much need her signature and a good whimsy set to make using Sara hypercarry more worthwhile than just slotting Fischl on the team, who's able to add in her own damage to lighten the amount Clorinde needs to be competitive. So TLDR, just use Fischl. The Princess Endeavor Talang will give you consistent electro application and damage, which will be super important for swirling and especially aggravate. Fischl's also amazing battery, allowing your Clorinde to burst every rotation with little ER investment, which allows Clorinde to start her damage windows with her burst for an instant high damaging E, which should be an extra action than just using her skill normally, and the burst itself does a pretty good amount of damage. Now for even more detail, Clorinde's aggravate teams will just be Fischl, Nahida, Kazuha, or Sucrose. Clorinde's self-heal means you don't have to run a defensive unit at all, as she'll be able to very quickly heal off the damage dealt to her, leading you to use the shuttlecock with no issues. And Nahida has a lot of value in having the best danger application, and with her A1, she'll also give Clorinde up to 250 EM, so you won't have to use an EM sense for Clorox in this team. And I don't think I really need to explain why Fischl's so good here, but basically Fischl has an A4 that will trigger on every electro-related reaction procced. Aggravate is a reaction only limited by your electro application that adds a flat amount of damage from your stats. So whether you deal 1000 damage or 1,000,000 damage, the amount aggravate adds will stay the same, so unlike Vaporize, you don't need to capitalize on big hits, and instead smaller faster hits would be preferred, like Fischl's A4. And assuming you have a decent Fischl, this damage is enough to carry teams, so even a character like Keqing, who doesn't do that much damage, can add Fischl into her aggravate teams as she applies a lot of electro, and will be able to proc aggravates for Fischl very often. So now you take that same principle and apply it to Clorinde, who has a better damage profile than Keqing, while also having a pretty fast rate of electro application, and you get a very strong duo with the both of them. them. Additionally, because Fischl at C6 has a 12-second uptime twice, working on 25-second long rotation means you're able to maximize her uptime and therefore damage. Clorinde normally can't do this because she has a 16-second cooldown, but if you use the Zajef set, she can operate in these 25-second rotations, having a damage window twice in one rotation. Because normally she would have to play in an 18 to 20-second rotation, which only gets one Fischl window. I do think that people are over-exaggerating how good TF is going to be, which I'll explain in a later video, but this further cements Clorinde and Fischl as very good partners in what in my opinion will be Clorinde's best team. But outside of Aggravate, there are two other teams in my opinion that will be just as good. Sticking with an Onamo unit and just replacing Nahida for the better Archon, we have Clorinde's Taser teams. I can't say for certain, but mathematically this will be a downgrade to just using Nahida for Aggravate, but it still has some interesting things I want to talk about. For starters, without Clorinde's healing skills or for Bond of Life, when factoring Furina's healing bonus, you end up healing a lot, so even with Furina's team-wide drain and having no other healer on the team, you'll still get a good amount of fanfare, which in addition to Kazuha, gives you quite a high damage bonus. And Clorinde will constantly overcap her HP, so she will also proc Furina's A1 for the entirety of Clorinde's field time, which somewhat alleviates the drain, which is nice. And as I said before, Fischl is pretty much the only Electro you can use here for consistency. You also can't really run Thundering Fury on this team because Furina's burst lasts 18 seconds with the 15-second cooldown, and you would need so much ER to make this work, as you'd have to burst off cooldown every 15 seconds for Fischl's window, which is technically possible, but I wouldn't recommend it, on top of the fact that controlling EC triggers is very hard, unlike Aggravates which are guaranteed, as long as you hit with Electro, so there could be some inconsistency with the cooldown reset there. I think that's all there is to discuss about EC. Let's move on to a team that combines both of the Archons and Best Girl Fischl for Quick Bloom. The team would look like Clorinde, Fischl, Furina, Nahida. Normally Quick Bloom carries like Sino would use double Dendro on their teams, as you'd need a sustain unit, ideally, but there's no need to do that in this case, as Clorinde and a prototype Amber Nahida will give you enough healing to not only survive, but get a decent amount of fanfare stacks. This team holds the same principle as Quicken teams, to where you can take advantage of the Quicken damage from both Fischl and Clorinde, and additionally with Furina's Hydra application you get some blooms to add to your total team damage. And because Furina's Hydra application was on the slower side, you have a very high ratio of quicken up time, which is great for the Electro girls, while also being buffed by Furina's damage bonus. So yeah, also a great team.
Hey guys, so here is the delightest of the people. Anyways, so I'm going to follow in my brother's footsteps and start, you know,
Why do you have a Southern American accent?
but I'm gonna start, you know, posting on social media soon, so I'll let y'all know my and y'all can follow me. So yeah,
Please give me the microphone.
I'll see y'all later. Goodbye. Mic drop.
Okay. The last teams to go over are Cerberus stuff, I guess. The problem with Clorinde's option in these teams is kind of just who you would use besides Fischl. The only off-field Pyro units are Zhangling and Toma, in which I don't think you'll have an amazing time using Zhangling, because that is just a downgrade to using Raiden, as she lowers ERX and buffs burst damage on top of having to play in a longer rotation, when you can use shorter ones for close to the same DPS. And if you go with Toma, then like, again, what other unit besides Fischl are you adding to complete the team? Unless you want to have a struggle beta or go with Bennett, in which case why is Toma here? So again, all roads leads to using Fischl, in which you can either go with Toma to finish the team or Bennett. So for literally every team archetype you can use, Clorinde fitting in Fischl is going to be a very strong recommendation to get the most out of her. And while I have you thick thigh loving folks here, I may as well explain to you why Fischl is so good, so you don't only build her for Clorinde's sake. To put things briefly, Fischl is great because of how non-invasive she is into your team structure, whilst being completely self-sustainable and working as a flex slot in all teams beside cryo damage dealers, and of course Nilo Bloom. And what I mean by that is, first, she isn't energy hungry, and with a small amount of substats like around 120 on solo Electro teams, you don't need any more for any kind of team, as there isn't really solo Electro teams that demand you to cast your burst every single rotation. I think it's only like Nouvellette, so yeah, you won't really need to build around her energy needs. Second, Electro also doesn't interfere with reactions besides freeze. You can't lose vapes from applying Electro, you actually get more vapes. Dendro teams besides Nilo are strengthened by Electro and so on. And because Fischl isn't a buffer like Bennett who only works in attack scaling teams, you're able to use Fischl in all attack, HP, and defense scaling teams, as well as slot her into reaction oriented teams like Dendro, or double Onimo Swirl teams. And I've covered all of Fischl's teams in more detail in my Fischl guide, which is still up to date, but for her teams that have been created since then, Fischl is a great flex slot for Nouvellette. She enables Electrocharge Swirls, which is nice passive damage, and she fits in really well with Nouvellette's long rotations. Also a good flex slot for Navia, but to a much lesser extent, as Navia has a lot of good sub of DPS options. Next, Furina opened up some teams. Kokomi EC is really good and better in AoE than Mono Hydro, so I personally prefer it to the Mono Hydro variant. Elon carried teams as well, slotting Fischl nicely, and Noelle driving teams too. And the most recent buff besides Clorinde was Chevreuse, in which whenever you're running a Pyro carry alongside Chev, Fischl is basically your only option as an Electro unit to proc overloads that aren't horrible to play, making Bennett, Chevreuse, and a Pyro DPS a new solid team core. And I think that's about it for now. Can't wait for Emile to come out, and Fischl is one of her best teammates again. And with that, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on Clorinde, as I'd love to hear it and I respond to almost every single comment. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys on the flip side. Peace.